Okay, so I also wanted to do a kind of brand review um, to to round out a little more of what this YouTube channel could be about. And I thought Commons would be a good place to start. Um, it's a little bit interesting that the first brand review I'm doing is a brand that reviews brands. But let's go with it, especially because I think there's some things that I like about Commons. I think it's directionally a force for good, but there are some issues with it that I want to get to. So, Commons is an app to kind of track your spending. It's not maybe the best app just for spending, but kind of the point is tracking your spending, but also tracking the carbon footprint associated with that spending. Um, their kind of thesis is any given dollar that you're spending has, on average, an associated carbon footprint. Now, some of it doesn't, which they'll count as nothing, like um, certain digital purchases, just moving money around, things like that. But on average, even some like digital purchases from Apple, all the way to literally buying gasoline, all of these have an average carbon footprint per dollar. Um, so I'm just gonna go through their website for now, not go through the app, though the app is really only available on your phone, but this still has some screenshots of the app. And I'm just going off the top of my head a little bit. I mean, I have pretty formed thoughts about this from having used the app, but I thought I'd just get this out there. So it's kind of pretty cool in kind of estimating your carbon footprint and maybe giving you ideas of like, hey, this is an area where either I'm spending a lot of money or is really carbon intensive relative to my other purchases or relative to other people even. So that's where I think it's directionally a useful tool. Um, it had it's kind of telling you like, you know, you should avoid flights. Like flights are, which I might do a whole separate video about. Flights are one of the most carbon intensive kind of ways to spend your time. Um, Things like that. It's not the best at then differentiating between brands in a given category. Um, it'll differentiate if it's specifically a brand or kind of category within it that it's identified as sustainable. Like it'll recognize in kind of its survey about you if you're purchasing renewable energy versus just what the automatic grid mix is, but it might not differentiate between, say, um, say like two given supermarkets, and say one is like a refill supermarket. It it sources everything local. But if it's not, um, or even if it is, sometimes specifically reviewed in their brand reviews, it's not going to differentiate that from your kind of generic, say, Acme supermarket. No offense to Acme. So that's kind of the beginning of the trouble, but that's kind of the least of the trouble. Some of the then like it rates all these different brands, which, I mean, kind of they're directionally useful. They're like things that are rated good or best are generally gonna be better than, I guess they don't have the poorly rated things over here, but if you searched, well, let's say Amazon, it'll literally say dirty money for Amazon. But even something more innocuous like H&M, it'll just rate fair, and that'll be poor and harmful, I believe. So that's kind of directionally good, but thing like, I've been getting some things from Colored Organics, it'll kind of say, well, it's still putting out some even though it's using good materials, they'll still put out some plastic, and it doesn't have a bunch of information that the people at Commons want, so they're just going to rate it poor. Which is still informational, it's just maybe not the only thing you go on in your purchasing decisions. Or I think Patagonia might be the best, and it is like top rated, but kind of things that review, I've been noticing this things that review sustainability in brands kind of like to pick on Patagonia. They kind of like to be like, well, we're even more stringent than Patagonia. Which, let's see if there's anything in particular that it's nitpicking. It's not really saying, as far as I can see, that anything in particular is harmful. It's just saying maybe there's some uncertainty, maybe they're still phasing out some things, which, I don't know, I feel like is kind of nitpicky. So that's one thing. Moving on, I guess not to bury the lead, one of the things they encourage, which kind of viewing your emissions in this, like, you're spending more, and as you go through the month, your footprint is adding up and adding up. They encourage offsetting, which is one of the big ways they make money, because they're kind of taking a fee from that offsetting purchase. Which, let's see if I can maybe find some more information to just show how does Commons make money. When you purchase offsets for flights, gifts, or through Commons Climate Stewardship subscription, Commons charges a 20% transaction fee to cover the costs of our time-intensive evaluation and monitoring processes. This is standard for offset providers. So that's kind of fine, but it might not be the most impactful thing you can be doing. There's kind of only so much you can offset, and is that really making your emissions a net zero? Is it like nothing ever happened? And really, the kind of common knowledge is that we need these offset strategies anyways to combat climate change. It's not like something extra that there's just an unlimited amount of. We can't just all go on whatever flights and then bang, do the offset and it's fine. So I've found for me kind of like, which also maybe I'll do a separate video on, that Giving Green kind of donating to climate research, climate advocacy is a way to kind of multiply your impact, kind of find the most bang for your buck, in terms of spending to avoid emissions, or reduce emissions, or whatever. They have a bunch of different strategies, which we can look. So now we see Giving Green is kind of like, as opposed to offsetting, which they also have options for offsetting, but their most impactful choice are these research organizations that are saying, hey, how can we decarbonize these things that are kind of difficult, that kind of might not have a ton of money going towards them, or just might produce some novel thing, whether that's like aviation and shipping is a good example of that, in kind of being something that's hard to decarbonize and not a lot of focus is going into that, but it's a big opportunity, for lack of a better word. So anyways, back to Commons. So that's kind of one thing. And then the other thing is some of their kind of articles, their ideology that they're putting out there. Some of them aren't the most rigorous that I would like to see. The thing I think especially is relevant, I guess, nowadays is their kind of thoughts on artificial intelligence, AI, um, that, I mean, maybe picking, but I mean, as late as October 16th, they've had a new article about it. But back in the day, they were like, well, ChatGPT uses all this energy, it's going up, it's terrible, you shouldn't use AI so much. Though they're saying not necessarily, but they're saying like they need to be more transparent. Where I just think, especially at the time, the way they were putting this out, they're saying AI is using all this energy, it's a big problem, etc., etc. When there's kind of bigger things to think about, not that you can't think about small things. It's just if you kind of go through the spectrum of what's more and less emissions intensive, this is kind of smaller in the scheme of things, especially since it's all electrified, it can all be decarbonized more or less easier than some of these harder to decarbonize things like aviation. Which I might link an article about that. An article about a separate article, I guess, about AI, large language models, climate impact. But basically, it's not so big in the scheme of things. That I just feel like Commons is kind of missing that context here in their articles, where they're kind of doing it a little better in the actual app in comparing, like, on a per dollar, per $100 basis, this category is emitting this much and this category is emitting that much. So I think that is a good overview of Commons. Please let me know if any of the things I suggested you want to see a video on in the future. And that's all for now, and I'll see you in the next one.